Welcome to Divorce Not Murder, the podcast where we hopefully make divorce more appealing than homicide. I'm your host, Kristina Ivy, mental health therapist, mom of two, and new addition to the ranks of the recently divorced. We've also got Robert Taylor here, Idaho-based divorce attorney and step-parent extraordinaire. Hi, Robert.
Hey, Kristina.
How are you today?
Good. How's your week been going?
Oh, I started back up at work after a leave of absence, and so I'm getting back into the swing of things, but it is a slow process. I opened my email to like 900 emails and just noped right on out of that for a while.
No, that sounds like a big cup of nope.
Note to self, don't take 2
Yes.
months off of work and expect to come back and not be inundated with just messages.
Emails. Yeah.
I've heard some questions this week like, how do I know? How do I know when I need an attorney for a divorce? Do I need an attorney?
Yes, I think that's a good question. We like to keep the topics relevant and trendy here, and this is kind of coincidentally a conversation I've had 3 different times this week, and so that would be a good discussion for tonight's episode.
Can I tell you how I knew I needed an attorney?
Absolutely.
I asked you.
What'd I say?
Yes. Or at least, if it's contentious, yes.
Yeah. I generally think, do I need an attorney? The answer is either yes or somebody that understands the process. I think there's this ideal that like, well, if you have an attorney, I want an attorney. But I do a lot of uncontested divorces where I'm the only attorney for 95% of my cases. And so then, that would go against that advice. Like, hey, they have an attorney, you want an attorney. It's like, wait, aren't you the attorney? But I definitely think it helps to have somebody to navigate the process who's done it before, who can make sure things are done how you want them. I think there's a good benefit to getting it done right the first time. Even if you agree and everything's written out and it's the best, I hear a lot of like, we're still good friends, we just don't want to be married anymore. We've been living apart for 3 years, everything's great. Do we need a lawyer? And I think, I do think TV has this, a stereotype of one type of lawyer, and maybe think about it more in terms of like, do I need a tour guide? I just had a buddy came back from hiking Denali in Alaska last month, and he signed up for a tour guide because he would have someone that has done it before, knew where the rest stops were, knew how much food to take, knew what the weather was going to be. So they, eventually got to the top of that mountain. But you're not required to get a guide. You can just go grab a backpack, and I don't know if you need a permit or not.
I really love that analogy, actually, because I think the typical kind of presentation you see in television and media is a shark, right? You need a shark in your corner who's going to get you everything and like you win the divorce. But for people who aren't interested in villainizing the other person or making it a battleground, they just need a guide. They need somebody who can kind of walk them through all the different pieces, make sure they're considering all the different things that maybe sometimes get missed, dotting those I's, crossing those T's. I think that's a great little analogy.
Yeah, and so I got a call this week from a lady who got divorced earlier this year. They had a house, and they decided that the husband would sign the house over to the wife in lieu of getting any spousal support. And now it's time to sign over the deed to the house, and the husband's like, I don't want to do it. And the decree is silent as to the house, and as to child support, and as to spousal support. I'm like, I don't super know how they got that through the court system, but they did. And they, I was your attorney, and they have one now. We're happy with them. That's why we were talking. But they didn't have, neither one had one when they were getting divorced. And, she had already paid $5,000 to an attorney, is on the hook for another $10,000 in legal fees. I don't know what his situation is, but they could have came to me 4 or 5 months ago, probably giving me around $3,000, and we'd have had them done, divorced and done correctly the first time, and they would be on their way. Now they're going to spend thousands of dollars in legal fees, where they could have spent the money at the beginning, even if it wasn't with me, with whoever they wanted to hire, that would make sure that, the house and the spouse support were figured out. Um, Sometimes, the degree is final and you can't go back and change your mind. If something's omitted, then that becomes a problem. What do we do about it? And that's a whole headache and a whole hassle. And anytime you're trying to amend or modify or change or set aside a divorce decree that's been signed by a judge, you're probably going to be, at least it's not a bad day, it's a challenging day. And it's better to do it right the first time.
It's kind of a random question, but it just
Yeah.
popped in from this. When people do have a signed decree, they want to make an addendum, they want to make a change. Do they typically stay with an attorney that they've worked with on the initial process, or do you tend to see people kind of come to you at that addendum point and you're like, all right?
I think it depends how much they, that relationship, how much they like their divorce attorney during the divorce. Did they get along? I don't want to say it was a fun, but did they have, a good relationship built on trust? Not to be too cynical, but do they still owe $10,000 to that other attorney? The attorney probably doesn't want to work for free anymore. Do they feel like that attorney hosed them? Are they just upset at that attorney? Did they call that attorney and that attorney just doesn't have the caseload right now to help them? And they're like, hey, I love you, but I'm sorry. So there's a lot of factors. I mean, I definitely think as an attorney, I'm doing a good job. If an attorney, a client calls me up down the road and says, hey, we want to end something or have this other legal problem, maybe it's a speeding ticket or something, can you help me out? And so it is not concerning, but it is interesting if they, there's a reason why they're not going without an attorney. And I will say, that was a red flag, especially if you have an attorney and you're looking for an attorney. I mean,
It puts
sometimes,
your kind of antenna or radar up, and you're wondering how that relationship might go if you take them on as a client.
yeah, I mean, sometimes there's just personality conflicts. Sometimes there's, I like to do it this
Unreasonable
way.
expectations.
That's honestly, there's that. And then also there's unpaid fees. Sometimes I hear, hey, my
Hmm.
attorney's not doing anything. Oh, well, are your fees current? Well, mostly. And it's like, well, hey,
Right.
let's
Okay.
connect these
Yeah.
dots. But sometimes I hear, hey, I call my attorney 5, 6, 7 times, and he never calls me back. Or, this case has been going on for 6 months, and I don't feel like we're getting anywhere. And I've had clients too. I'm not trying to talk bad about it. Just it doesn't seem like a good fit or a personality fit, or the way that I want to pursue the case is different than the way they want to pursue the case. And
Hmm.
ultimately, it's not my life, right? Like, hey, if you're not
Hmm.
comfortable with me, you want to find somebody else. I support that. I'm happy to issue a refund with any, unearned funds, and I'm happy to make that transition as smooth as possible to the next individual. Because my business, we're talking about kids and property
Hmm.
and retirement, livelihoods. If you don't trust the person,
Honestly, yeah, honestly, as a counselor and a therapist, very similarly, when I work with somebody, it's not just whether or not they want to work with me, it's do I think we have the capacity to work well together?
yeah,
And that rapport, and you're talking about vulnerable things, you're talking about very serious issues. It's important that you have that rapport.
yeah. And I would tell you at this point in my career, people hire me, but really I'm hiring them. It's a matter. I mean, there's more work in this business right now in the state of Idaho than there are attorneys doing it. Some counties where there's a 90-day waiting list to go see a lawyer, so someone calls and I don't feel like it's a good fit or we're not clicking. I don't, I may not take that case and not feel bad about it. And I got it. They
Sure.
might call around and look for attorneys too, but I mean, if they hire somebody else, like I don't care, I don't know about it, doesn't impact me at all. But if they hire me and it's not a good fit, that impacts me. So I have a vested interest in, making sure someone's a good fit. I don't want to say good client, but a good fit for me. Like
Yeah.
one good example, we do everything online, we're all electronic. And this seems to be true with the older generation, but sometimes someone will say, I don't have an email address, or I got to come into your office, or I don't do any online
People who
stuff.
do it all old school. They want
Yeah.
to see you face to face. They want to
Yeah.
see the paperwork. They want to hold it in their hands.
Yeah, and it's just like, I'm sorry, man, I don't think we're gonna be a good fit for each other.
Yeah.
And it's fine because I want them to find someone that they are a good fit with.
And I'm sure those people are out there too. Yeah.
Yeah, there's something for everybody. I don't want to say it's like dating, but there's, every case has a lawyer. It's just a
Yeah.
matter of matching up the clients with the lawyers. And sometimes, I can tell, I might answer a question and hear, well, that's what the other lawyer I talked to said. And then it's like,
Mm.
okay, well, your opinion shopping. You have the expectation in your head and you're trying to find somebody who would tell you that,
Tell you
or
what you
make you
want to
some
hear.
promises.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or it's like, "Oh, I don't like that. Let me call the next guy and see if it's something different." And in some circumstances, like I would say spousal support is like a factors and like a needs based. Attorneys could have different opinions, different analysis for the same facts based on experience and knowledge.
Yeah.
And
There's different
um,
subjectivity there.
yeah, but like child support's a calculation, it's a formula. Like you make this,
Yeah.
he makes that, you're doing this is how much you're paying. You don't like the number that I gave you, well, the guy down the street's going to give you the same number because everyone uses the same software.
Mhm. You can
But
always agree to pay more, but you can never pay less.
more or less, there's a little wiggle room, and not a lot. I would say child support's the least flexible part of the entire process.
I was just going to say, so it sounds like you've got clear criteria. If somebody feels like they need a guide, they feel really just like they don't know what steps to do next, they're worried about doing it wrong. That's kind of a clear flag of, okay, that maybe you should consult with an attorney. But what if
Yeah.
somebody feels like their situation is low contention? They need someone savvy in the legal system and who can file the paperwork appropriately, but maybe they don't want to pay attorney rates or feel like they need an attorney. What are other options available to people?
Yeah, I mean, I think even just an hour with an attorney could probably answer some questions, right? And sometimes, people just need options or what's practical. They don't really know. Like for a house, everyone's like,
Mm-hmm.
what do we do with our house? And there's only three options. And once you explain them to somebody, they say, yeah, that makes sense. And then they start doing the math in their head to see what's going to work. But when you're starting with a blank sheet of paper, they don't know anything. So
Mm-hmm.
even just giving them those three options, especially if it's getting along type situation, then they can go talk to their spouse and say, hey, guess what? We have three options. What should we do?
Yeah.
And honestly, like what's practical is, often going to drive that train. But, there's clinics too. A lot of state bars do clinics. Some court districts, jurisdictions do clinics, low income clinics, there's family law clinics, there's all sorts of them. And again, going and just talking to that attorney for 20 to 40 minutes for free, even if you have to pay, like in the consultation situation, you're going to know more than you started. And that
Yeah.
might be enough. Like, you're not going to really get how to figure out the paperwork, but you're going to solve the house, or you're going to
You're
solve
gonna
the,
you're gonna have answers or at least multiple choose your own adventures for the big issues.
yeah. And then, at least in Idaho, we have a court assistance officer at each county. That's somebody you can go talk to. They have forms. They're not lawyers. They'll give legal advice and give you forms. I believe they can help you figure out child support, which is often like the most complicated piece because it's a formula and we don't really learn about it in high school, so a lot of people don't know how to do it. I use software for it, but they have access to the software, and so they can plug that piece in for you. They can tell you where to physically go in the courtroom and how many copies to bring and what to do with the copies, kind of a tour guide.
Stick component,
Maybe
not the legal advice component.
Yeah, or maybe like the visitor center help desk type person, like that person's not going
Yeah.
to get off their office and go climb the mountain with you, but they might give you some other guidance or, tell you what you might want to pack type. In Idaho, we have really good self-help forms. You can Google whatever it is, Idaho State Supreme Court self-help form. And those are a bunch, not just on divorce, but on a number of topics. I would say that the state bar and the state Supreme Court, it's really impressive when it comes to this resource. When I was a young lawyer, I'd just go to the website and steal the forms and be like, well, it's got to be right. It's what the state does. It's from the state Supreme Court. Yeah, and the majority of those forms were written by one of my former law school professors. Even though Microsoft Word would tell you who the author is, it still has
Yeah.
her name there for the majority of my forms.
So
Uh,
you gotta
but
trust it.
yeah, I mean, I do. She probably wrote the textbook for it. But that's just one more resource, and again, not just family law, but across the board, our state's done a good job with making that available to people. And then,
In truth, though, there are a number of people in the world who somewhere in their broad network of friends and acquaintances, they know an attorney or two.
Yeah.
And generally, how do you feel as the person on the receiving end of that about giving advice to people? You won't hurt my feelings because you already gave me the advice. So
Yeah, I mean, it just depends who it is, when it is. Sometimes, and I'll give you an example. You got me when I was in a tent in Africa, the army. Wasn't a lot going on, so I had a lot of free time. I was bored,
I caught
so
you at a good moment.
we were texting. Yeah, and I,
Yeah.
shut down my practice for that month I was there. So I was, I don't know, itching at it or something, missing it maybe. But then,
Lucky
last
me, lucky me.
yeah, it was a good time. And then last month, last week, my assistant spent the week in Disneyland, and then somebody else I know reached out to me, in the height of trying to balance my law firm. I mean, I worked for 9 years without an assistant, and now she's been on board for 18 months, and I can't function without her. And so I unintentionally left her on read for a few days, and then when I circled back to her, she'd already kind of, took advantage of the court assistant's office and had already filed the stipulation in decree. So I kind of felt bad because I would have answered some questions, but just again, it's kind of the timing. And I guess how well you know people. Sometimes I can tell it too. Like sometimes I have someone add me on Facebook and I don't know who they are, and then it says like you have 47 friends and all people I went to high school with. Like 3 days later, I got a new message from that person, and it's like, oh, this is well disguised, you know. Um, I don't know. It just depends. And generally speaking, I'm happy to answer some questions and give out some bit of advice from time to time. I mean, just general advice, really. I mean, every situation is dependent on a bunch of factors, and it's hard to get into the weeds without knowing all the factors. And, I think a Facebook message in Africa is not always the best way to get all those facts. That worked out well for you. Um, one question I get a lot though is like, hey, where you read my forums? I went to the court assistant guide. I went online and you can Google how to fill out divorce forms. We have some forms on our website actually that I should link to, that I've included that I got from the state website, and the instructions with them. People will call though and say, hey, will you read my forms or review them? I just want to make sure it's done right. I don't really offer that service. It's kind of an all or nothing. I'm responsible for any advice that I give out, so I don't get to control what you do with that advice in those forums once I leave, or once you leave my office. And so it just kind of makes me reluctant to look it over. And the other thing too, even I've had people hire me to do it, but it's like, look, I don't know any of the context, I don't know any of the facts, I don't have any of the information. You're sending me this divorce decree and saying, is it fair? And it's like, hey, I get this, she gets this, he gets that, she gets that. And it's like, look, I don't know the value of those accounts. I don't know how much that land is worth. I don't know, and it's like you're just asking me to take a shot in the dark, or I need these 47 pieces of information. By the time you give me that information, now it's no longer just a quick peek at this thing.
Yeah,
And so,
that makes a lot of sense.
yeah, and I feel like a jerk, and I do think it's important to make the law accessible and affordable. And some people might have the forms filled out, and an hour of my time could square them away. But a lot of risk there on my part. And again, I don't get to control what they do with that advice once they leave. Or I need to know 47 pieces of advice or of information to give an informed opinion.
Yeah. I've gotten the impression that not a lot of attorneys are open to a risk of litigation themselves.
Or
So,
malpractice. It's become
yeah.
malpractice. We have a rule. I'm bringing on an intern for the summer, and we were talking yesterday, doing some training, and it's like rule number one: nobody does anything that costs me my license, including me. I don't know.
Sounds like a good rule.
Yes, I don't even know what rule number two is, but that's one of them.
Refer to rule number one.
Yes, yes. Because without a law license, it's a law office isn't very effective. So, but generally speaking, I think it is a good idea. Divorce is a life-changing event. There is a legal event. You're going through the court system. You've got to follow state rules. Sometimes statutes. It's definitely, in my opinion, I think worth having somebody be involved and can provide you some guidance and left to right limits and some options. And, it's like I joke sometimes when I was in, when we're both from at home, there's a barbershop on Air Base Road that has a sign that says like, we fix $8 haircuts. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, I fixed the $199 divorces that you can find online.
Yeah.
But I won't tell you, like, it's a lot easier to fix those $199 divorces before they're finalized than 3 to 9 months later.
Right. Trying to
I had a,
challenge a decree, like you said, that had already been signed by a judge.
yeah, or you make a mistake in it and you can't. So I had a friend one time when my daughter was born, I had a plan to take 6 months off of practice. It took me 6 months to close my office, wind down my caseload. And then that 6 months turned to 12 months. So
Mm.
it was like an 18-month period where I didn't take any clients. But I was getting towards the end of the first 6 months. I was down to like 2 or 3 cases and things were going. And I was, answering the phone and telling people, no, not helping you. But I had someone I knew personally, someone I have a lot of respect for, someone I liked a lot. I still do. Reach out to me and say, hey,
Glad that you still do.
yes. But, reach out. So I'm getting divorced. Can you help me out? And it's harder to tell people no than people you don't know. And
Sure.
I was like,
Yeah.
man, I'd love to, but I've just spent the last 5.5 months wrapping my practice up so I could take the next 6 months off with my daughter. I'm gonna have to pass. And this guy was like the smartest, super sophisticated guy. Seriously, he's brilliant. He's like, well, maybe I'll just do it by myself. And I was like, I
Mhm.
don't know that I would, you got the money. You're talking about some complicated issues. And him and his wife, they had been like high school sweethearts. They were still friends. They had some kids together.
Mm.
Everything was peaceful, and it's like, I'll just do it myself. And I was like, I don't really think that's a good idea. You got the money. You got these complicated issues. Just go find somebody, give them some money and solve this for you. And I saw him down the road a few months later. We ran into each other and he said, hey, can I ask you a question? And I said, yeah, anytime. He had the understanding in his divorce decree, his understanding of the divorce decree was that he would sell the house and they would use the proceeds to pay off all the debts that the parties had acquired during the marriage and then split what was left. However, he sold the house, he paid off all the debts, and then the next month happened, and his wife called and said, hey, what's all this money that you're supposed to send me? You're supposed to send me X money a month for the next 30 months, which was supposed to go towards paying the debts. And he was like, no, it's cool. I paid off the debts with the house. We're even now. And she said, no, it says right here, you're supposed to pay me this much money for the next however many months it is.
Mm.
I want that. And so it was like it was like 30 grand. And I don't want to say it was a misunderstanding, but it was definitely a different, they had different opinions of what the
Different
decree said.
interpretations. Yeah.
Yeah. And the wife was correct, and he was like, hey, is there anything I can do? And it's like, no, dude, sorry, man, it's too late now. Where, he had to basically eat 30 grand, where he could have got some legal advice for a number far less than 30 grand to
Mm.
fix that for him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, kind of a last analogy I'll end with, I like to think about it like if driving around your car and the check engine light comes on, what I do, I like to go to YouTube and figure out what's happening. Or I'm going to first go to
Yeah.
AutoZone. I dig a little code. I Google
Hmm.
that. I figure out what it is. I buy it apart. I go to YouTube. It's like a 4-minute video. I go spend 75 minutes in my garage on Saturday trying to make this 4-minute fix or replace this part. I get frustrated. I give up. I call the mechanic on Monday and I take it to my car to the mechanic and I pay however much money to get fixed, right? Like that's what I do.
Hmm.
My wife's got a best friend whose husband is a mechanic. He works for a major dealership. On the weekends, he does, his side hustle is more mechanic work in his garage. He's got heavy tooling on the man. He's brilliant when it comes to his hands, so when him or his wife are driving around and the check engine light come on, they just pull it to the garage and just, does whatever needs to be done, right? And so
Hmm.
if you're getting divorced, it's like, hey, the check engine light for life has come on. Do you need to go find somebody or can you do it yourself? And maybe you can do it for yourself, but especially if you're in a position where you can afford it. I understand not everybody can afford legal advice and their services. I try to make affordable, but it's not affordable to everybody. I understand that. But if you're in a position or you're paying $15,000 of legal fees 4 months later to fix the decree, you're definitely in a position to get it done right the first time. And
Yeah.
again, going back to that tour guide, like you're gonna go climb a mountain. Do you want to figure it out by yourself? It's your first time doing it. A lot of people say I've never been divorced before and what they're doing. Or even if I've been divorced like 7 times, I mean, you're probably not an expert, right? Like I did 7 divorces, like 3 days, the last 3 days alone. Just go get yourself a tour guide and at least have somebody help you through it, whether it's mediator, the court assistants, the self-help forums. I don't want to say YouTube. I don't know, but there's all sorts of like podcasts. We didn't talk about that, but there's all sorts of like experts and
Yeah.
knowledgeable people out there. Some better than others, some more expensive than others, but
I
don't try to
think this
climb the mountain
requires
yourself.
people to have good personal insight of their own limitations, right? Like
Yeah,
you need to be able to recognize what you do and do not know and where you have to ask for help.
yeah, and
Um,
it's like a
yeah.
breakup, but the government's involved. So I joked, like I went to a wedding one time.
The
I was
government's in
like,
everything, Robert.
well, I know, but I went to a wedding one time. It was awesome, and I joked that like, oh, my friend loved her husband's boyfriend so much that they decided to register the relationship with the government, which is kind of what I don't want to be like conspiracy
Yeah.
theorist, but like that's what you're
Yeah.
doing with the government. Now you're deregistering, or you're like you got a boyfriend girlfriend. It's whatever you want it to be, but now
Yeah.
you
You
got
have your
married.
social media post, and then you also have to notify all the governmental bodies.
Yeah, the state of Idaho gets a say in the outcome of the end of your relationship, and if you don't know how to
Yeah.
navigate that process, find somebody who does.
Yeah. Well, so I think I just got lucky, and I don't recommend trying to get lucky to people, but I had you to ask, some questions of and kind of set that framework for me. It was like I had a 1 hour consultation with an attorney. And then, when I wasn't in a contentious divorce situation, we were really communicating well and on the same page about 95% of it. So what I ended up doing was getting a hold of a mediator. And this was someone who had retired from being a divorce attorney, gone into mediation, and therefore knew how to sort of talk people through any contentious parts left over, the considerations that they should be looking at, and then file the paperwork for you.
Yeah, a mediator is a
Yeah.
great way to go. And it's often cheaper than an attorney. Mediator, if you're not aware, is a neutral third party that helps facilitate discussions to get to an agreement. They're neutral as opposed to an attorney that has vested interest in
One
advocating
party.
for one party. They, like you said, I was gonna say they know what they're doing, but like you said, a retired lawyer. Sometimes you get retired judges. That person is helping with the options. I mean, I do a lot of mediation, a lot of uncontested stuff. I see my role as generating options and answering, letting the discussions happen. A lot of times they happen off the neck, in between appointments or whatnot. But you definitely have someone that kind of gets the topics and knows what questions to ask so that the clients can answer them. And then when you're done, gets the agreement through the court system and hopefully it's at least covered all the bases and everything that's included. The lady I talked to earlier this week said, like, I don't know how the judge let us get divorced without including the house in the decree. And it's like, look, the judge don't know you have a house if you don't tell the judge that you have a house, right?
Right.
Obviously,
Right.
you go and you talk to mediators, probably 2 to 3 sessions, a couple hours each.
Mhm.
Whether or not you own a house is probably going to be discussed. It's probably going to
Yeah.
come up. It should. If it doesn't, like, go someplace else.
So the overarching theme of all of this is like you can get to the end result that you need from a lot of different pathways, but what's important is that you have a guide, somebody who is familiar with the system, familiar with the process.
Yeah, it
That's
doesn't have to
kind
be an
of
attorney, but I definitely don't recommend people go at it alone. And again, even if it's like that free clinic, I haven't volunteered in a while, but I used to volunteer before I had kids at the clinic. There are the people who do volunteer are some of the best lawyers in the town. There are people who, when I was a new lawyer, I would call their office and try to get free advice from myself. And then I started volunteering at these clinics, and they would be there. So I'd be like, "Hey, can I get your thoughts for a second?" Like it's like the top level attorneys are volunteering their time to the public for free during these settings. So go there, find a local clinic in your district or your community, and go pick their brains and get some free advice if you're unable to afford, an hour of their time. I would tell you that 30 minutes of their time for free is just as good as an hour in their office that you're paying for.
Nice. Good tips for our folks out there looking to get the government involved in their breakup.
Get the government out of the relationship.
Right.
I don't know.
So,
Sometimes I do think it's crazy. Like, if I wanted to divorce my wife, which I don't, like, it'd be like every other breakup I've ever had in my life. But I'd have to stop and go tell the government about it. It's kind of weird. I don't know. Sometimes it's
yeah.
weird that, like, my whole job is, like, breaking people up and, like, getting the government out of the relationship. Like, I don't know. It's, like, I'm not a breakup expert, but it's just, like, there's this whole legal community and, business, I guess. I don't know what the word I'm looking for
Yeah.
is. Economy. And
Found
that's
it.
it. Yeah. Around getting people out of marriage.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But all righty. Well, I think that was a good discussion. I enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it as well.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing your insights, tips, and tricks. I'm gonna make sure I recommend guides for all my friends.
Tour guides for everybody.
All right. We'll talk again soon.
Bye.